Captain Deho stood at the window of his ship, looking out at the massive structure that floated in space before them. The Galactic Archive was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. It spun slowly around two bright stars covered in towers and domes that reached out in all directions like the arms of a giant metal tree. "First time seeing it?" asked Bo-Ra, walking up beside him. She was the team's language expert, someone who could speak more alien languages than anyone else in the human fleet. "Yes," Deho said quietly. "It's beautiful and scary at the same time." Bo-Ra nodded. "I've been reading about it for years. They say it holds the books and stories of over 3,000 different alien races. Some of those stories are millions of years old." Deho turned away from the window. Today was the most important day in human history. Earth had only discovered how to travel faster than light 50 years ago. Before that, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Then they found out there were thousands of other intelligent species out there, all connected by something called the Galactic Community. The archive was the heart of that community. It was where all the great books, poems, songs, and stories were kept. Every important piece of writing from every advanced civilization was stored there. Getting access to the archive meant your species was accepted as truly civilized. "Are you ready, Captain?" asked Wu Jin, the team historian. He was young but very smart, and he had spent his whole life studying human culture and history. "As ready as I can be," Deho replied. "Let's go meet these archive keepers." The team gathered in the shuttle bay. Besides Bo-Ra and Wu Jin, there was So Young, who was their expert on alien customs and behavior. She had studied how to talk to different species without accidentally insulting them. There were many ways to make mistakes when dealing with aliens. The shuttle ride to the archive took 20 minutes. As they got closer, Deho could see that the structure was even bigger than it looked from far away. Ships from dozens of different worlds were docked at various ports. Some of the ships were so strange that Deho couldn't even tell which way was the front. "Remember," So Young said as they prepared to dock, "the archive keepers are very old and very proud. They think of themselves as the guardians of all knowledge in the galaxy. We need to show them respect, but we also need to show them that humans deserve to be here." The docking port opened with a soft hiss. Deho led his team through a long corridor that seemed to be made of some kind of crystal. The walls showed moving pictures of different alien worlds and creatures. It was like walking through a museum of the entire galaxy. At the end of the corridor, they entered a huge round room with a ceiling so high that Deho couldn't see the top. Books and data crystals filled shelves that went up the walls as far as the eye could see. Floating platforms moved up and down, carrying robed figures who were organizing the materials. "Humans," said a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "You have come." The creature that approached them was unlike anything Deho had ever seen. It walked on two legs like a human, but it was much taller and covered in dark green scales. Its head was long and narrow, with yellow eyes that seemed to look right through them. This was Veltar, the chief archivist. "Thank you for meeting with us," Deho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are honored to be here." Veltar's eyes moved slowly over each member of the human team. "Honor," he said slowly. "Yes, that is why you are here, is it not? You want the honor of having your species works added to our collection. We believe that human literature and philosophy could contribute something valuable to the archive," Bo-Ra said carefully. "Our species has created many works that express universal themes about life, love, and the search for meaning." A sound came from Veltar's throat that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a snake hissing. "Universal themes," he repeated. "Tell me, human, how long has your species existed?" "Modern humans have existed for about 300,000 years, Wu Jin answered. "And how long have you had what you call civilization?" "Advanced civilization for about 10,000 years, Wu Jin said, though he was starting to sound less confident. "And space travel?" 50 years. Veltar nodded slowly. 50 years, he said. "Do you know how long my species has been traveling between the stars? 50,000 years. Do you know how long we have been contributing to this archive? 30,000 years. He turned and walked toward one of the floating platforms. The humans followed him. As the platform rose up through the levels of books and crystals, Veltar continued speaking. The works in this archive represent the wisdom of civilizations that have existed for millions of years. They contain thoughts and ideas that have been refined over countless generations. They explore concepts that your species has not even begun to understand. The platform stopped at a level where the books seemed to glow with their own inner light. Veltar picked up what looked like a crystal cube and held it up to the light. This single work contains the complete philosophical system of the Corvani Empire. It took them 50,000 years to develop these ideas. They explored the nature of consciousness, reality, and existence in ways that shaped 17 other civilizations. He put the crystal down and picked up something that looked like a twisted piece of metal. This is a poem written by a being whose species died out 2 million years ago. The poem captures the feeling of watching your son grow old and knowing your world will end. It has brought comfort to countless beings facing the end of their own worlds. Veltar turned back to face the humans. And what do you bring us? Stories about your primitive wars? Tales of romance between members of your own species? Philosophy that barely scratches the surface of questions we answered long ago? Deho felt his face grow hot. Our literature may be young, but it comes from the heart. Our stories deal with the same basic struggles that all intelligent beings face. The need to find purpose, to connect with others, to understand our place in the universe. Basic struggles, Veltar said. Yes, that is exactly what they are. Basic, simple, primitive. So Young stepped forward. With respect, Archivist Veltar, perhaps our youth is exactly what makes our perspective valuable. We see these struggles with fresh eyes. Our stories might offer new ways of thinking about old problems. Another hissing sound from Veltar. New ways? Child, there are no new ways. Everything your species thinks it has discovered, we have known for millennia. Every emotion you think you have explored, we have mapped completely. Every philosophical question you think you have raised, we have answered thoroughly. The platform began to descend back toward the main floor. As they traveled down through the levels of stored knowledge, Veltar delivered his final judgment. The Galactic Archive is not a museum where we display the crude scratchings of every species that manages to build a ship capable of reaching the stars. It is a repository of the greatest achievements of mind and spirit in the known galaxy. Your species has achieved nothing that deserves preservation here. They reached the bottom level. Veltar walked toward the exit corridor without looking back at the humans. When your species has existed for at least 10,000 more years, he said, when you have something truly original to contribute, when you have wisdom that goes beyond your simple animal needs, then you may return. Until then, you are not welcome in the archive. The humans walked back to their shuttle in silence. Deho felt crushed. He had hoped this mission would mark humanity's acceptance into the galactic community. Instead, they had been dismissed, like children trying to sit at the adults' table. As their shuttle pulled away from the archive, Bora finally spoke. He was wrong about one thing, she said quietly. What's that? Deho asked. He said we couldn't possibly have anything new to offer. But maybe the fact that we're new is exactly what makes us different. Maybe our stories are worth something, precisely because we see things differently than species that have been around for millions of years. Wu Jin looked out at the archive as it grew smaller behind them. Maybe we should find out what kind of works they do consider worthy, he said. If we could study their literature, we might learn something about what makes a story truly great. So Young nodded. The public terminals are accessible to any species with basic clearance. We might not be able to enter the main archive, but we can at least look at their catalog systems. Deho made his decision. We're not going home empty-handed, he said. If they won't let us contribute to galactic culture, at least we can learn from it. We'll stay and study what we can access. Maybe someday we'll understand what it takes to earn a place in the archive. As the shuttle docked with their ship, none of them could have imagined that they were about to discover something that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth and humanity's place in the universe. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence for several minutes after Admiral Jiho finished speaking. The holographic displays still showed human military capabilities, and the list of demands that completely reversed the expected outcome of these negotiations. What had begun as a surrender ceremony had transformed into something none of them had prepared for. Chancellor Velthar was the first to recover from the shock. She activated her communication device and began speaking rapidly in the Zephyrian language to someone on her homeworld. Other delegates quickly followed her example, creating a chaos of alien voices as everyone tried to contact their government simultaneously. Prime Minister Gextal stood up and walked closer to the human delegation. His massive form towered over them, but Admiral Jiho did not seem intimidated. The two leaders studied each other for a moment before Gextal spoke. "You have surprised us today," he admitted, "but surprises do not change the fundamental balance of power in this galaxy. The Confederation has thousands of ships and billions of soldiers. Humanity is still a small young species. Size is not everything," Jiho replied calmly, "and age does not always bring wisdom." Gextal's forearms gestured toward the holographic displays. "Even if your claims about hidden fleets are true, you cannot match the combined might of the entire Confederation." "You are correct," Jiho agreed. "If every species in the Confederation united against humanity, we would eventually be overwhelmed." This admission seemed to give Gextal confidence. His voice became stronger as he pressed his point. "Then you must see that your position is ultimately hopeless. These demands of yours are meaningless without the power to enforce them." Colonel Wujin stepped forward with a slight smile on his face. "You are assuming that every species in the Confederation would unite against us, but that assumption is also incorrect." The holographic display changed to show the current political situation throughout the galaxy. Several species were highlighted in different colors representing their likely positions in any expanded conflict. Green indicated likely allies of humanity. Blue showed neutral species that would avoid involvement. Yellow marked species that were uncertain or internally divided. Only a few were colored red to indicate probable enemies. "As you can see, Ambassador," Minju explained, "the species that would actually fight against humanity represent less than 40% of the Confederation's total military strength. The rest would either support us, remain neutral, or be too busy dealing with internal problems to participate in galactic warfare." The implications of this analysis created another wave of urgent conversations among the delegates. Many species that had assumed they could count on support from allies now realized those allies might not be available when needed. Velthar finished her communication with her homeworld and turned back to the humans. "My government wants to know what guarantee you can provide that humanity will honor any agreement we might reach." "The same guarantee you can provide," Jiho replied. "Our word, backed by our demonstrated capabilities." "That is not sufficient," she insisted. "Agreements require trust, and trust must be built over time." "True," Minju acknowledged. "Which is why our terms include provisions for gradual implementation, reparations paid over several years rather than immediately, defense agreements that begin with limited cooperation and expand as trust develops, formal apologies that acknowledge mistakes without requiring species to admit intentional wrongdoing." She activated a new display showing the proposed timeline for implementing the human demands. Each item was broken down into reasonable steps that would allow both sides to verify compliance and build confidence in the process. But even as these discussions continued, Admiral Jiho was checking his timepiece more frequently. Finally, he stood up and straightened his uniform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this offer will expire in 10 minutes. The chamber immediately became quiet as everyone focused on the human admiral. 10 minutes? Gextal protested. "These are complex matters that require consultation with multiple governments. We cannot possibly reach agreements in such a short time." "You have had 2 years to consider your relationship with humanity," Jiho replied. "You chose to spend that time planning attacks instead of seeking understanding. The time for extended deliberation has passed." Several delegates began, speaking at once, all demanding more time to consider the human terms, but Jiho raised his hand for silence. "If our terms are rejected, humanity will consider all species that participated in attacks against our colonies to be in a permanent state of war with us. he stated. "We will take whatever actions we deem necessary to protect our people and our interests." "What does that mean exactly?" asked a delegate from the insectoid species. Colonel Wu Jin answered with military precision. "It means that human forces will no longer limit themselves to defensive actions. It means that species which choose to remain hostile will find their shipping lanes disrupted, their outer colonies under threat, and their intelligence networks compromised." "You are threatening the entire galaxy," Velthar accused. "No," Minju corrected. "We are threatening only those species that threaten us. Any species that chooses peaceful coexistence has nothing to fear from humanity." The countdown continued, as delegates frantically tried to reach consensus among themselves. Some wanted to accept the human terms immediately, rather than risk expanded warfare. Others insisted that giving in to human demands would set a dangerous precedent that would encourage other species to make similar threats. With 5 minutes remaining, a group of smaller species announced they were willing to accept the human terms and establish formal diplomatic relations. This created panic among the larger powers who feared losing their subordinate allies. With 3 minutes left, the crystalline species declared their neutrality and withdrew from the negotiations entirely. They wanted no part in a conflict that might destroy their carefully maintained isolation from galactic politics. With 1 minute remaining, Chancellor Velthar made a desperate attempt at compromise. "We are prepared to offer modified terms," she announced. "Partial reparations, limited recognition of human territory, and a formal ceasefire." Admiral Jiho consulted his timepiece one final time. "Your modified terms are rejected," he said simply. "The time for negotiation has ended." He turned to his companions. "Ambassador Minju, Colonel Wu Jin, we are leaving." The 3 humans began gathering their equipment with calm efficiency. The alien delegates watched in growing panic as their opportunity for a peaceful resolution literally walked away from the negotiating table. "Wait," Gextal called out. "You cannot simply leave. These matters must be resolved." Jiho paused at the entrance to the chamber and looked back at the assembled aliens one final time. "These matters will be resolved," he agreed. "But not through negotiation." "What will you do?" Velthar demanded. "What we have always done," Jiho replied. "Whatever is necessary to protect our people." As the human delegation walked out of the chamber, the aliens behind them erupted into chaos. Some species immediately began blaming others for the failure of negotiations. Several delegates rushed to contact their military commanders to prepare for expanded warfare. Others tried to reach out to human representatives to arrange separate peace agreements. In the corridor outside the chamber, the 3 humans walked steadily toward their shuttle bay. They did not speak or show any emotion as they made their way through the space station that had hosted these failed negotiations. "Do you think they will come to their senses?" Minju asked quietly, when they were safely away from alien listening devices. "Some of them will," Jiho replied. "Others will have to learn the hard way that humanity is not the same species they thought they were dealing with." Wu Jin checked his communication device and reported the latest intelligence updates. "Our fleets are moving into position. The Antarian stealth ships are already disrupting enemy communications. The Kalari have activated their defensive networks around human colonies." As their shuttle departed the space station, they could see alien ships beginning to scatter in different directions. Some were rushing back to defend their home worlds. Others were trying to intercept human forces that were already moving throughout the galaxy. The holographic displays in their shuttle showed the current status of human military operations. After 2 years of careful preparation, the full extent of human capabilities was finally being revealed. Fleets emerged from hidden bases throughout human space. Stealth ships appeared near alien military installations. Intelligence networks that had been dormant suddenly activated to provide real-time information about enemy movements. "The galaxy will never be the same," Minju observed as she watched the tactical displays. "No," Admiral Jiho agreed. "But change was inevitable. The only question was whether that change would come through cooperation or conflict." He looked out the shuttle's viewport at the stars that stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere among those stars, The species of the galaxy were making decisions that would determine the future of interstellar civilization. They chose conflict, Wu Jin noted. Now they must live with the consequences of that choice. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying the human delegation back to their own territory. 3 days after their rejection, the human team found themselves in the commercial district of the archive station. This area was completely different from the grand halls where they had met Veltar. Here, beings from dozens of different worlds bought and sold goods, ate strange foods, and conducted business in a dozen different languages. Ji-hoon, the team's young data analyst, sat at a public terminal that looked like a tree made of metal and light. His fingers moved quickly over the strange symbols that served as controls. He had spent the last 2 days learning how to use the archive's basic search systems. "Any luck?" asked Hye-jin, sitting down next to him. She was the team's expert on alien biology, but she had been spending her time talking to the various creatures who visited this part of the station. "It's incredible," Ji-hoon said, his eyes wide with excitement. "The amount of information in here is beyond anything I imagined. But also," he paused, looking confused, "there's something strange going on." "Strange how?" Ji-hoon pulled up a list of titles on his screen. "Look at these entries from the ancient literature section. This one here, it's called The Hero's Journey to the Distant Shore. The description says it's about a warrior who travels for 10 years trying to get home after a great war." Hye-jin read over his shoulder. "That sounds like the Odyssey. You know, the old Greek story about Odysseus." "That's what I thought too. But look at the date." Ji-hoon pointed to a string of symbols at the bottom of the entry. "According to this, it was added to the archive 12,000 galactic standard years ago. That's long before humans even developed agriculture." Hye-jin felt a chill run down her back. "That has to be a mistake." "I thought so too, but look at this one." Ji-hoon opened another entry. "A story about a king who pulls a magical sword from stone and unites his kingdom. Added 11,000 years ago." "King Arthur," Hye-jin whispered. "And this one, a tale of 2 young lovers from families that hate each other. Their love story ends in tragedy but brings peace between their people. 10,000 years old. Romeo and Juliet." Hye-jin's voice was barely audible. Ji-hoon's hands were shaking as he scrolled through more entries. "There's dozens of them, stories that sound exactly like human myths and legends, but they're all dated thousands of years before Earth was supposed to have any contact with the galaxy." Across the plaza, Hye-jin had been having her own strange conversations. She had made friends with a trader named Clix, a short blue-skinned being with 4 arms who sold rare books and data crystals. "Your species is new to the stars, yes?" Clix had asked her earlier that day. "Very new," Hye-jin had replied. "We've only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years. Clix had made a sound that was probably laughter. "Ah, the young races are always so eager to learn. Tell me, do your people have stories? Myths and legends?" "Of course. Every human culture has stories." "What kind of stories?" Hye-jin had told him about some of Earth's greatest tales, the adventures of heroes, the wisdom of ancient philosophers, the poems that captured the deepest human emotions. Clix had grown very quiet as she spoke. Finally, he said, "Your stories, and they sound familiar. Very familiar." "What do you mean?" "There are tales in the archive, very old tales that sound much like what you describe, but they come from a civilization that disappeared long ago." Now, as Ji-hoon showed her the impossible catalog entries, Hye-jin remembered that conversation. She grabbed his arm. "Ji-hoon, search for something specific. Look for the Earth Chronicles or anything with the word Terra in it." Ji-hoon typed the words into the search system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen filled with results. Hundreds of them. "There's a whole section," Ji-hoon said, his voice barely working. "Look at this, the complete Earth Chronicles, Literature and Philosophy of the Terra Collective. It's marked as one of the archive's most important historical collections." With trembling fingers, he opened the entry. The description made both humans feel like the world had turned upside down. A comprehensive collection of literary and philosophical works from the Terra Collective, one of the galaxy's most influential ancient civilizations. This collection includes epic poetry, dramatic works, philosophical treatises, and historical records from the third planet of the Sol system, commonly known as Terra or Earth. The Terra Collective is believed to have been the source of many foundational concepts in galactic ethics, governance, and artistic expression before their mysterious disappearance approximately 12,000 galactic standard years ago. Below the description was a list of works that made both humans feel sick. Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, The Lord of the Rings, Don Quixote, The Divine Comedy, Paradise Lost. Hundreds of Earth's greatest literary works were listed, all attributed to this mysterious Terra Collective. "This is impossible," Yejin said. "These are our stories, human stories. They were written by humans on Earth. But according to this, they're 12,000 years old," Jihoon replied. "Humans didn't even have writing 12,000 years ago." Captain Daeho and the rest of the team gathered around the terminal when Jihoon called them over. Everyone stared at the screen in shock. "There has to be an explanation," Bora said. "Maybe these are just similar stories. Maybe the themes are universal and different species naturally create similar tales." "I thought that too," Jihoon said. He opened one of the files. "But look at this." On the screen appeared text that was unmistakably human, not just human in theme or structure, but actually in English. The words of Shakespeare's "to be or not to be" soliloquy filled the display, exactly as it appeared in every human textbook. "That's word for word Hamlet," Woojin said. "Not similar, not inspired by, exactly the same." So Young was reading other entries. "It's not just literature," she said. "Look here, philosophical works by something called Kong Chu and Siddhartha, Gautama and Socrates of Athens. Those are Confucius, Buddha, and the Greek philosopher Socrates. All dated thousands of years before these people were supposed to have lived on Earth," Bora added. Captain Daeho was quiet for a long time, studying the screen. Finally, he spoke. "There are only a few possible explanations. Either this is all some kind of elaborate mistake or hoax, or what?" asked Woojin. "Or somehow human culture and literature existed in the galaxy long before humans developed space travel, maybe even before humans as we know them existed." Yejin thought of her conversation with Clix. "The trader I was talking to mentioned that these stories came from a civilization that disappeared, the Terra Collective. What if what? What if humans didn't originate on Earth? What if we're not from Earth originally, but we came from somewhere else and somehow forgot our own history?" "That's crazy," Woojin said. But he didn't sound convinced. Jihoon had been searching through more files while they talked. "There's something else," he said quietly. "I found records about Earth itself. Not just the literature, but actual surveys of the planet, biological data about humans, even genetic information. All of it dated thousands of years ago. Show us," Daeho ordered. The files that appeared on screen were detailed beyond anything the humans had imagined. Star charts showing Earth's exact location. Maps of the continents that matched modern satellite images perfectly. Biological descriptions of humans that included details about DNA that Earth scientists had only discovered in the last century. Someone was studying Earth and humans very carefully, very long ago, Bora said. "But who and why? And how is it that we don't remember any of this?" Added So Young. Jihoon found another section in the files. "There are references here to something called the Great Forgetting and the Reset Protocol. But the files about those are restricted. I can't access them." Daeho made a decision that would change everything. "We need to get into the restricted files. If there are answers about what happened to this Terra Collective and why Earth's literature is already in the archive, we have to find them." "But how?" asked Woojin. "We don't have clearance for the deeper levels of the archive." "Then we'll have to find another way," Daeho said. "We came here to earn humanity's place in galactic civilization, but it looks like humanity might already have a place here. We just forgot about it." That night, back on their ship, the team held a secret meeting. They had to decide whether to return to Earth with the news of this impossible discovery, or stay and try to learn more. "If we go back now, no one will believe us," Hyojin said. They'll think we made it all up because we were embarrassed about being rejected. And if we stay, we might be risking our careers or even our lives, So Young replied. Breaking into restricted archive files is probably illegal. But we might also be on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history, Ji-hoon said. What if humans really were once a galactic civilization? What if we forgot our own past somehow? Don't we owe it to our species to find out the truth? Captain Daeho looked at each of his team members. These were good people, smart people, people who had devoted their lives to learning and discovery. They had come to the archive seeking acceptance for humanity. Instead, they had found evidence that humanity might once have been one of the most important civilizations in the galaxy. We stay, he said finally. We find out what really happened to the Terra Collective. We find out why Earth's greatest stories were already here. The confrontation happened sooner than Captain Daeho expected. When he and his team arrived at the main archive entrance the next morning, they found Veltar waiting for them with 6 other archive keepers. The ancient beings stood in a line, their faces showing mixtures of anger, fear, and something that might have been sadness. You have stolen from us, Veltar said without any greeting. His voice was colder than Daeho had ever heard it. We took information about our own people, Daeho replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Information that should never have been kept secret from us. Your people? Another archive keeper stepped forward. This one was shorter than Veltar, with silver scales instead of green. You know nothing about your people, human. You know nothing about what you were or what you chose to become. Hana moved closer to Daeho, carrying a data pad with the evidence they had gathered. We know enough, she said. We know about the Terra Collective. We know that humans once ruled half the galaxy. We know about the reset protocol and the Great Forgetting. A sound like wind through dry leaves came from the assembled archive keepers. They were communicating with each other in a language too, fast and complex for the human translators to follow. Finally, Veltar spoke again. You should not have learned these things. The knowledge was protected for good reason. Whose reason? Asked Bora. The Terra Collective chose to forget, but they never chose to be lied to. You've kept the truth from us for 12,000 years. We kept the truth from you to protect you, said a third archive keeper, this one tall and thin with skin like tree bark, and to protect everyone else in the galaxy. From what? The archive keepers looked at each other again. Daeho could sense that they were making a decision, weighing their options. Finally, Veltar made a gesture that seemed to be some kind of signal. Come, he said. If you insist on knowing the truth, then you will learn all of it. But be warned, knowledge cannot be unknown once it is learned. They followed the archive keepers through corridors that Daeho had never seen before, deeper into the station than any of the public or research areas. The walls here were covered with paintings and symbols that showed the history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of civilizations, the meetings of different species, the great wars and the great peace agreements that had shaped their shared culture. At Tiu, the center of it all, in picture after picture, were humans. Not primitive humans struggling with basic technology, but advanced humans leading councils, commanding fleets, teaching other species, and building wonders that spanned entire star systems. The Terra Collective was not just another civilization, Veltar explained as they walked. They were the civilization. For over 5,000 years, they were the teachers, the leaders, the problem solvers for the entire galaxy. They entered a vast chamber with a ceiling so high it was lost in shadows. In the center of the room was a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it had existed 12,000 years ago. Hundreds of worlds glowed with the blue light that indicated Terra Collective presence. At their peak, humans controlled or influenced over 400 worlds, said the silver-scaled archive keeper whose name was Mordan. Every major trade route, every important discovery, every significant cultural development, humans were involved in all of it. But that's good, isn't it? Asked Wu Jin. If humans were helping everyone, if they were making the galaxy better, why did they stop? Because they were too good at it, replied the bark-skinned keeper, who called himself Zenkar. Other species stopped trying to solve their own problems. Why struggle with difficult questions when you could ask a human for the answer? Why develop your own technology when humans would share theirs freely? The holographic display changed, showing the galaxy in a different time period. Now the blue lights were fewer, but they were brighter and more centralized. The Terra Collective realized that they had created a galaxy of children, Veltar continued. Species that could not function without human guidance. Worlds that would collapse if humans were not there to manage them. It was a kindness that had become a curse. Hana studied the genetic data on her pad while the archive keeper spoke. What she found there made her hands shake. The humans who chose the reset, she said quietly. They weren't just any humans, were they? What do you mean? Asked Captain Deho. Hana held up her data pad so the others could see. I've been analyzing the genetic profiles from the restricted files. The humans who underwent the reset process weren't random citizens of the Terra Collective. They were the leaders, the scientists, the philosophers, the artists, the teachers, the best and brightest of their entire civilization. Mordan nodded slowly. The Terra Collective's ruling council made the decision together. They would sacrifice themselves to save the galaxy from stagnation. The most brilliant human minds agreed to become primitive again, so that other species could learn to think for themselves. But some humans refused to accept the decision, Zenkar added. They believed the reset was wrong, that the Terra Collective had a responsibility to continue guiding the galaxy. These humans fled to distant worlds and tried to preserve their knowledge and technology. The holographic display changed again, showing scattered red dots throughout the galaxy. These refugee humans have lived among other species for 12,000 years, disguising themselves, hiding their true nature, waiting for the day when humanity would return to the stars. They're still out there? Asked Ji-hoon. Some of them are, Veltar confirmed. And when your species achieved faster than light travel, they began to watch Earth carefully. They wanted to see what kind of civilization humanity would build the second time around. Young-Soo had been quiet during most of the conversation, but now he spoke up. The stories, he said. The human literature that's already in the archive. Those weren't just preserved as historical records, were they? They were left as tests. Tests? Asked So Young. Tests to see if humanity would redevelop the same wisdom and creativity that made the Terra Collective great. Every time humans created new art, new literature, new philosophy, it was compared to what was already in the archive. The question was whether we would become like our ancestors or something completely different. Veltar's yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter. You are more perceptive than we expected, young human. Yes, your species has been observed and evaluated for centuries. Every major work of human culture has been studied and analyzed. And what was the verdict? Asked Captain Deho. For a long moment, none of the archive keepers spoke. Finally, Mordan answered. Inconclusive. Your species shows flashes of the brilliance that made the Terra Collective great, but also displays the violence and selfishness that worried them in their final years. Worried them how? The Terra Collectives. Last years were not peaceful ones, Zenkar explained. Some humans began to believe that other species were inferior and should be controlled rather than guided. Wars broke out between different human factions. The galaxy came close to civil war. The holographic display showed scenes that made the human team feel sick. Massive fleets of human ships attacking alien worlds. Entire civilizations being enslaved or destroyed by humans who believed they had the right to rule by force. This is why the reset was necessary, Veltar said. The Terra Collective leadership realized that their species had grown too proud, too certain of its own superiority. They chose to start over rather than risk becoming galactic tyrants. But the reset didn't solve the problem, Yoonji realized. If some humans refuse to participate, and if they're still out there, then the same conflicts could happen again. Yes, Mordan said grimly. And now that humanity has rediscovered space travel, those ancient conflicts may be about to resume. The humans who fled the reset have been building their power in secret for 12,000 years. They have technology and knowledge that your Earth-based civilization cannot imagine. What do they want? Asked Minho. To restore the Terra Collective's empire, Zenkar replied. But this time, without the moral constraints that limited their ancestors. They believed that other species should serve humanity, not learn from it. Captain Deho felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His mission had been simple: to gain access to the Galactic Archive for humanity. Instead, he had discovered that humanity was at the center of a 12,000-year-old conflict that could determine the future of the entire galaxy. "Why are you telling us this?" he asked the archive keepers. "Because you have forced our hand," Veltar replied. "Your break-in to our restricted files has been detected by monitoring systems throughout the galaxy. The refugee humans know that Earth has learned about the Terra Collective. They will act soon." "Act how?" "They will try to make contact with Earth," Morden explained. "They will offer humanity advanced technology and knowledge about its true heritage, but they will demand loyalty in return. They want to use Earth's population as soldiers in their war to reconquer the galaxy. And if Earth refuses, then they will destroy your world, rather than allow it to remain independent," Zenkar said quietly. "They cannot risk having another human civilization develop that might oppose them." The humans stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had learned. Minho was not the kind of person who usually broke rules. As the team's security specialist, his job was normally to make sure everyone else followed procedures and stayed out of trouble. But tonight, he was about to commit what was probably the biggest crime of his career. "Are you sure about this?" asked Yunji, the team's technology expert. She was crouched next to him in a maintenance corridor deep inside the archive station. In her hands was a collection of devices that she had built from spare parts over the past 3 days. "No," Minho admitted. "But I'm sure we need to do it. Anyway, the plan was simple but dangerous. The public terminals in the commercial district could only access basic information. The restricted files about the Terra Collective and the Great Forgetting were stored in the deeper levels of the archive, levels that required special permission to enter. But Yunji had discovered that the archive's security systems were old, designed for a time when few species would even think of breaking in. After all, who would want to steal books and stories? "The access panel should be right around this corner," Yunji whispered, checking her handheld scanner. "If I can tap into the maintenance network, I should be able to create temporary access codes for the research levels." They crawled through the narrow corridor until they found what they were looking for: a junction box covered in alien symbols and blinking lights. "This is it," Yunji said. She connected her devices to the junction box and began working. Lines of code appeared on her small screen, most of it in languages she didn't understand. But she had spent days learning the archive's basic computer systems, and she thought she could find her way through. "How long?" Minho asked, keeping watch. "Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe less if I'm lucky." While they worked, the rest of the team waited in their quarters aboard the ship. Captain Deho paced back and forth, worried about what might happen to Minho and Yunji if they were caught. "We should have found another way," he said to Bora. "If they're arrested, it could start an interstellar incident." "There was no other way," Bora replied. "The archive keepers made it clear they won't help us. If we want answers, we have to find them ourselves." Back in the maintenance corridor, Yunji smiled as her screen flashed green. "I'm in," she whispered. "I've got access to the research levels, but it won't last long. Maybe an hour before their security systems notice the breach." Minho activated his communication device. "Deho, we're ready. Send Jihoon down to meet us." Jihoon arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a portable data recorder and looking nervous. "I still can't believe we're doing this," he said. "Believe it," Minho replied. "And remember, we only have about 40 minutes before we need to get out of here." The research levels of the archive were completely different from the public areas. There were no floating platforms or crystal walls here. Instead, long corridors stretched out in all directions, lined with storage units that contained the galaxy's most precious and secret knowledge. "The restricted Terra Collective files should be in Section 7 Alpha," Yunji said, checking her scanner. "This way." They moved quickly through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The archive was largely automated at this level, with few guards or staff members to worry about. Section 7 Alpha was a small room filled with data crystals that glowed with a soft blue light. Ji-hoon connected his recorder to the access terminal and began downloading files. "There's so much here," he said, watching the data flow across his screen. "Complete historical records, genetic databases, cultural surveys. It's going to take forever to go through all of this." "We don't have forever," Minho reminded him. "Just grab what you can." What Ji-hoon found in those files would have shocked him even if he had been prepared for it. The Terra Collective hadn't just been any ancient civilization. According to the records, they had been the dominant force in the galaxy for thousands of years. The files contained star charts showing a vast network of Terra Collective colonies and outposts spread across hundreds of worlds. Trade records indicating that Terra technology and culture had influenced every major civilization in the known galaxy. Diplomatic documents showing that Terra representatives had helped establish the first galactic government systems. But most shocking of all were the genetic records. The Terra Collective hadn't just been humans. They had been exactly the same as modern humans. Same DNA structure, same physical appearance, same brain patterns. The files even contained tissue samples and medical records that could have come from any modern Earth hospital. "This is impossible," Ji-hoon whispered as he copied the data. "According to these files, humans were running half the galaxy 12,000 years ago. We had colonies on hundreds of worlds. We were teachers and leaders and explorers. What happened to them?" asked Minho. Ji-hoon found the answer in a section of files marked the Reset Protocol. What he read there made him feel sick. The reset hadn't been something that happened to the Terra Collective. It had been something they chose to do to themselves. According to the records, the Terra Collective had reached a point where they controlled so much of the galaxy that other species had become dependent on them for everything. They made the decisions. They solved the problems. They provided the technology and the wisdom that kept galactic civilization running. But the humans of the Terra Collective began to worry that they were preventing other species from growing and learning on their own. They were like parents who never let their children make mistakes or face challenges. So they made an incredible decision. They would use advanced technology to erase their own memories and reset their civilization back to a primitive state. They would give up their power and their knowledge so that other species could learn to think and grow independently. The files described the process in detail. Massive machines that could alter the genetic memory of an entire species. Ships that carried the Terra Collective population back to their home world, Earth, where they would live simple lives and slowly redevelop civilization naturally. Other galactic species were sworn to secrecy about what had happened. They were forbidden from interfering with Earth's development. The humans would be allowed to grow again at their own pace, without any outside help or guidance. They chose to forget everything, Ji-hoon said, his voice full of awe. They gave up the greatest civilization in galactic history because they thought it was the right thing to do. But there was more in the files. Records that suggested the reset hadn't been perfect. Some humans had resisted the memory wipe and had been forced to leave Earth entirely. These humans had scattered across the galaxy, hiding their true identities, and living as members of other species. "Look at this," Yoonji said, pointing to another section of files. "There are reports of genetic anomalies found in dozens of different alien species. Individuals who show traces of Terra Collective DNA even though they were supposedly born to non-human parents." "Descendants of the humans who escaped the reset?" Minho asked. "Maybe. Or maybe the reset wasn't as complete as they thought it would be." The most disturbing file was labeled Failsafe Protocol. It described a plan for what would happen if the reset experiment failed. If humanity redeveloped space travel but remained primitive and violent, or if they posed a threat to other species. In that case, the other galactic civilizations had permission to eliminate humanity entirely. "We need to go," Minho said, checking his watch. "We've been here almost an hour." Ji-hoon quickly downloaded the last few files and disconnected his recorder. As they prepared to leave, Yoonji made one more discovery that would change everything. "There's another section here," she said. "Files about current monitoring of Earth. They've been watching us this whole time, documenting our redevelopment, waiting to see what kind of civilization we would become the second time around." The files contained detailed reports on human history from the past 12,000 years. The development of agriculture, the rise of cities, the creation of writing systems, the Industrial Revolution, the World Wars, the space program. All of it had been carefully observed and recorded by hidden watchers. But the most recent files were different. They contained assessments of modern human culture and literature, reports analyzing human movies, books, music, and art, to determine whether humanity was redeveloping the same wisdom and creativity that had made the Terra Collective great. They're deciding, Ji-hoon realized. Based on what we've created in the last few centuries, they're trying to decide whether to welcome us back into galactic civilization or whether we're too dangerous to be allowed to survive. The team made it back to their ship without being caught, but they knew their time was limited. Sooner or later, the archive's security systems would detect the breach. When that happened, questions would be asked. As they sat in their quarters studying the stolen files, young Sue, the mission's archaeologist, made a connection that tied everything together. "I've been thinking about the stories," he said. "The human literature that's already in the archive. What if they weren't just preserved as historical records? What if they were left there as a message?" "What kind of message?" asked Captain Daeho, a message from the original Terra Collective to their descendants. "Think about it. Every culture in the galaxy has been influenced by these stories for thousands of years.